The heavy silence in the palace hall lingered even after Haru's bold declaration. Then, King Jiang finally rose from his seat, eyes fixed on the regal figure before him. "It has been over 20 years, the king said, his voice calm but edged with emotion. "Why have you decided to grace us with your presence now, Haru?" Haru's gaze didn't waver. "Because I had no choice, your majesty," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "The kingdom is crawling with hungry vultures and wolves, ready to tear apart the innocent and feast on what's left." Gasps rippled through the court. Across the room, Jin Suk, Jin Mu, and their loyal ministers stiffened, suddenly very still. The guilt clung to them like a scent, pungent and impossible to ignore. The king's expression grew pained. He exhaled slowly, lowering himself back onto his throne. "I feared as much," he murmured. "I've missed your wisdom, Haru. Since the day you disappeared, the light of this kingdom has flickered. We've been stumbling in the dark." Haru nodded solemnly. "And now the gods are angry, your majesty. They do not look kindly on tyrannical leaders, trample on others, keep company with men whose hearts are soaked in greed and treachery." A stunned hush fell over the court. Jin Suk flinched, his knuckles widening around the folds of his robe. He clenched his jaw as Haru's gaze settled briefly on him, and then moved on, as though he weren't even worth the weight of a longer glance. "If your majesty wishes to realign this kingdom with the heavens," Haru continued, "then heed this, the marriage between Crown Prince Kyung-hoon and Lady Jiao blessed again, this time according to palace rites. I will oversee it personally. And once that is done," his voice rose slightly, echoing off the marble walls, "let no one dare to question Jiaomi's place. She will be recognized as Crown Princess." He paused, sweeping his eyes across the room like a storm cloud watching the land below. "If there is anyone who wishes to challenge my judgment," he said, "step forward now." Not a single soul moved. Ministers shifted, casting each other cautious glances. But Jin Suk's rage was simmering just beneath the surface. His lips trembled with unspoken fury, and he turned his head slightly as if trying to contain the fire building inside him. His eyes flicked to Haru, filled with restrained defiance. Then, "King Jiang, since there are no objections," he said, his voice echoing with renewed authority, "this meeting is concluded." He looked toward the assembled court. "Preparations for the wedding of Crown Prince Kyung-hoon and Crown Princess Jiaomi will begin at once. As for the assassination attempt, those responsible must be thoroughly investigated. Tae-jin, I trust you to lead the inquiry. I want the truth, no matter where it leads." Tae-jin bowed. "Yes, your majesty." With that, the ministers began to disperse, along with Dae-hoon, robes swishing as they hurried to exit. Jin Suk lingered for a beat, shooting a venomous glare toward Haru before storming out with Jin Mu on his heels. The king turned to Haru, a warm smile replacing his usual stoic expression. "Stay at the palace, won't you? At least for a while. Your wisdom is much needed here." But Haru gently declined with a small shake of his head. "I still have my temple residence near the palace. That's where I belong. But if you ever need counsel, send a message. I'll come." The king placed a hand over his chest and nodded. "Then I'll be counting on you, wise one." With that, the king and queen made their exit, their attendants trailing behind. As Haru turned to leave, he paused, his gaze landing on Sunman, who stood quietly in a shadowed corner of the hall, unmoving. Their eyes locked. For a moment, Haru studied him with a gaze that seemed to reach into a distant past. He tilted his head slightly, as though he recognized him. Then, without a word, he turned and made for the doors. But before he could leave, hurried footsteps echoed behind him. "Wait!" Ji Yun's voice called. Haru turned as Ji Yun and Kyung-hoon approached, breathless and slightly disheveled from rushing after him. "Master Haru," Ji Yun said, bowing deeply. "Thank you, for everything. We didn't know how to get out of that mess until you appeared." Kyung-hoon nodded with a grateful smile. Seriously, I knew there was something mysterious about you, but I didn't expect that you were the legendary wise one. The kingdom's legendary oracle. He chuckled. I feel like I should start bowing every time I see you now. But Haru waved it off with a soft smile. Titles are burdens people place on you when they don't want to find answers themselves. I'm not important, I'm just someone people look for when they're lost. Kyung-hoon's smile faded a little as he followed Haru's gaze toward Sunman, still standing at the far end of the hall, and then to the doorway, where Jin-suk lingered, waiting like a snake in the grass. Hoon sighed. Sometimes. I wish I'd just kept my mouth shut back then. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. But listen to me carefully. The vultures are circling, and they will not rest. You must keep the truth between you locked away. If anyone finds out that Ji-yun is actually a man. Ji-yun's breath caught. Kyung-hoon's expression darkened. They'll swallow you whole, Haru finished. Ji-yun and Kyung-hoon both nodded solemnly. We understand, Ji-yun said quietly. No one will know, Kyung-hoon added, firm. Haru gave them a last look, almost paternal, then nodded and turned to go. Just as Haru's silhouette vanished beyond the halls, Ji-yun and Kyung-hoon lingered in the corridor, the tension finally starting to lift from their shoulders. But it didn't last long. Footsteps echoed behind them. Ji-yun stiffened instantly. Kyung-hoon turned, and his eyes narrowed when he saw who it was. Son-in-law, Sunman said, voice smooth as oil. May I speak with my daughter alone? Kyung-hoon's jaw tightened. Everything in him recoiled at the man, but he forced his expression into something neutral. You'll find me in our chambers, he said coolly, before brushing a kiss across Ji-yun's temple and walking away, but not without a final, pointed glance at Sunman. Once he was gone and the hallway fell silent, Ji-yun crossed his arms and looked at Sunman flatly. I'm not dead, if that's what you came to check. I wanted to know if you're hurt, Sunman said, glancing around to make sure they were alone. His voice softened slightly. Ji-yun's smile didn't reach his eyes. I hurt a lot, he said dryly. But not enough to kill me. Kyung-hoon took care of me. A flicker passed across Sunman's face but he nodded. Well, congratulations then. You got him to fall for you. I am glad you were able to pull it off. Ji-yun's shoulders tensed. What do you want? Sunman leaned in slightly. You didn't tell him, did you? About who you really are? Ji-yun lied smoothly, no. He doesn't know. Good. Sunman straightened. Because the time is almost here. I've been in contact with Hong Jae. Our allies are waiting. After the wedding, we'll convene. You'll receive instructions. Ji-yun's eyes flickered. Yuna, and Han-soo. Are they okay? Sunman's expression faltered for the first time. They're fine. As long as you don't waver. A beat of silence passed. And then Ji-yun said quietly, I don't think I can go through with it. Sunman froze. What? Ji-yun raised his chin. I love him. I love Kyung-hoon. The words landed like a slap. Sunman's face twisted with disbelief. What did you just say? I said I love him, I can't betray him, Ji-yun repeated, voice trembling but firm. You're insane. Sunman snapped, his voice rising before he forced it back down, glancing around to make sure no one heard. You told me yourself you would never fall for him. That he's the reason you suffer. Don't you know you would have been in his place? You would have been the prince if it weren't for what his father did. You're wrong. If not for your revenge, you would have never married my mother, Ji-yun said, eyes flashing. If King Jang hadn't killed your family, you'd be living in the palace with your real wife, some princess or some noble's daughter. Not her. I was just a tool for you. A pawn to use against the people you hated. Sunman recoiled, stunned by the sharpness in Ji-yun's voice. Ji-yun went on. You never looked at me as a son. Just a piece on your board. Sunman's face hardened. Are you forgetting Yuna and Hansu? If you love them, you'll. Don't. Ji-yun's voice cut like a knife. Threaten me with them again, and I swear I'll tell Kyung-hoon everything. I'll bring your whole plan crashing down. There was a long, stunned pause. Sunman stared at him, genuinely shocked. Living in this palace has changed you, he said coldly. You've grown fangs. Ji-yun didn't reply. He turned to go. I see now, Sunman said darkly behind him. You're no longer afraid. But you should be. Ji-yun paused mid-step. You love him. Then you should know, Sunman's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. Killing Kyung-hoon will be easier than touching the king. He's exposed. He drinks with his men, eats with his guards. One drop of poison. One slip from a horse. That's all it takes. If you defy me, I will not hesitate to spill his blood. Ji-yun's breath hitched. He turned back sharply. You wouldn't dare. Sunman smiled, slow and satisfied. There it is. Your weakness. Ji-yun's fists clenched, but Sunman leaned in close. You'll do as I say and go through with the plan. I'll give you until after the official wedding. After that, we move. And with that, Sunman turned and walked away, the echo of his footsteps swallowed by the grand, empty corridor, leaving Ji-yun standing frozen, heart pounding, breath shallow. In the shadows of the palace courtyard, hidden from the prying eyes of the palace, Haru and Jiun-suk stood facing each other, the tension between them thick like smoke. Jiun-suk's face was flushed with anger, his voice a harsh whisper. You ruined everything, Haru. Why did you return? Why? Haru didn't flinch. His expression remained calm, though his eyes burned with quiet defiance. I ruined evil, Jiun-suk. And I'll ruin it again if I have to. I refuse to stand by and watch your wickedness unfold. Jiun-suk scoffed, his lips curling into a smug smirk. Wickedness? You speak as though I acted without cause. Need I remind you, old man, this all began with you. You're the one who prophesied that the future king would rise from my bloodline. A ruler with power over all things, the kingdom's greatest monarch. Haru's composure cracked, just for a second. His voice trembled. Yes. I did. I saw the vision. I believed in it. But you twisted it. You turned it into a weapon for your ambition. I only saw the end, Jiun-suk. I never meant for you to destroy the path to it. You've taken lives. Manipulated destinies. The prophecy will still come to pass, but now, only after blood has soaked this land. Rubbish, Jiun-suk sneered, waving him off. The path is set. I won't stop until that throne is in my lineage. Nothing will stand in my way. He turned sharply, ready to walk away. But Haru raised his voice, firm and prophetic. You won't live to see it. Jiun-suk paused. Mark my words, Haru continued, his voice now echoing with a strange, haunting resonance. Because of your cruelty and greed, the king will no longer be from your lineage. The gods have turned their backs on you. Jiun-suk laughed bitterly, glancing over his shoulder. Still playing the oracle, are you? You should have stayed in exile. You're just an old fool clinging to dead gods. He disappeared. Haru stood in silence for a moment, his breath heavy in his chest. Then, movement. A figure storming past in the opposite direction. Haru narrowed his eyes and called out, softly but clearly. Your Highness. The figure halted. Slowly, Sunman turned. He looked surprised. Suspicious. How, do you know me? Haru stepped forward slowly, his gaze steady. Time may have hardened your features, but I would know you anywhere. You were just a boy when I last saw you. I am so glad the god spared you, that you yet live. Sunman's expression tensed. The wise one, he muttered. The one who disappeared after the massacre. Did you think I would be happy to see you? I disappeared because the gods commanded it, Haru said. But I have watched from afar. I know what you've planned. I know the path you walk. Sunman's jaw tightened. If you know so much, then you know to stay out of my way. I have to stay out, Haru replied. The gods have forbidden me from interfering. But I can still warn you. Heed this, Sunman, tread with caution, or you will lose the very thing you treasure most. Sunman's eyes flickered, almost a flinch. I don't treasure anything. That's a lie, Haru said gently. Jiun, he is a rare soul. Brilliant. Brave. He could have soared, done so much more in this world. But you clipped his wings. And for what? Your pain. Your revenge. Sunman's hands curled into fists. I'm doing what should have been done. You think I don't know what was stolen from me? It wasn't your destiny to rule, Haru said sadly. You were meant to heal, not destroy. But now, if you continue on this path, things will turn tragic. And you'll never be able to undo what's to come. Sunman stared at him for a long, silent moment, eyes unreadable. Then he stepped forward. You left, he hissed. When we needed you most. Don't come back now and pretend you're here to save anyone. Don't become a problem for me. Keep your mouth shut, or I'll silence it myself. And your gods, he added with venom. I don't give a damn about them. He turned and stormed off, rage wrapped around him like a cloak. Haru stood still, the cold wind rustling his robes. His heart ached, not with fear, but with the weight of what he knew. Of what was coming. He looked up at the sky. So stubborn, he whispered. Both of them. So blind. His voice trembled as he spoke, May the gods have mercy on us all. Back at the throne room, Jiun was quiet as the maids bowed low and greeted him with warm smiles and gentle voices. Their words floated around him, welcoming, respectful, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. His feet moved on their own as they led him through the palace halls, each step toward Kyung-hoon's quarters tightening the knot in his chest. If you defy me, I will not hesitate to spill his blood. His father's words echoed like a curse. Ji-yun's throat tightened. Would he really? Could he actually? He clenched his fists behind the long sleeves of his robe, trying to will the thoughts away. But they clung to him like shadows. When the doors opened, Kyung-hoon was already standing there, arms open, face lighting up with that familiar, tender smile. You're finally here, he said, stepping forward eagerly. Ji-yun managed a small smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Kyung-hoon noticed immediately. His brow furrowed as he stepped closer, searching Ji-yun's face. What's wrong? He asked gently, reaching out to brush his knuckles across Ji-yun's cheek. Did something happen? Ji-yun looked away. Nothing, he lied quickly. I'm just tired. Kyung-hoon didn't look convinced. Ji-yun. I said it's nothing, Ji-yun said again, too fast, too forced. Guilt twisted in his gut. He hated lying, especially to him. But how could he tell him the truth? How could he confess that his father had threatened his life? That a part of him, buried deep and terrified, believed he might be forced to obey. Before Kyung-hoon could push further, the door opened again with a polite but firm knock, and Lady Han entered, regal as always in her crisp, formal robes. She bowed deeply. Your Highnesses, she said, then looked directly at Ji-yun. Per royal protocol, it is tradition that the crown prince and his betrothed remain in separate quarters until after the wedding ceremony. Ji-yun blinked. Wait, what? Kyung-hoon groaned dramatically. Seriously? That's an actual rule. Lady Han's expression didn't flinch. It is. The separation symbolizes purity and reverence before the union. The two scoffed, knowing they were long past innocent at this point. But Jialmi needs to be taken care of, Kyung-hoon argued, clearly grasping for any excuse. She is still injured. Your Highness, Lady Han interrupted, tone respectful but resolute. I understand your concern. However, it is my duty to ensure protocol is observed. She will be well cared for. You have my word. Kyung-hoon sighed in frustration and turned to Ji-yeon with a pout. This is ridiculous. They're treating us like we're teenagers sneaking around. Ji-yeon actually let out a small laugh despite himself. Maybe we are. There was a long, reluctant silence. Neither of them moved. Then, with everyone still in the room, Kyung-hoon leaned forward and pressed a soft kiss to Ji-yeon's lips. Ji-yeon kissed him back instinctively, completely forgetting they had an audience, until they heard the quiet cough of one of the maids. They both pulled away quickly, faces flushed. Lady Han raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Kyung-hoon let out a helpless sigh. Fine. Go. But I'm counting down the minutes. Ji-yeon nodded, forcing a smile, and allowed Lady Han to guide him away. The walk to the new chamber felt heavier than it should have. The maids whispered politely, and Lady Han spoke about arrangements and rituals, but Ji-yeon barely registered any of it. He was lost in the memory of Kyung-hoon's warmth, and the cold, looming threat of his father's words. When they arrived, the doors to the crown princess's chamber swung open, and Ji-yeon stopped in surprise. It was lavish. Gilded pillars, silk curtains, shelves lined with glittering accessories, and ornate wardrobes filled with layers of embroidered garments that shimmered under the golden light. Lady Han gestured politely. Everything here is yours, Your Highness. The maids will attend to your bathing, clothing, meals, and anything else you may need. Ji-yeon turned to her, suddenly feeling suffocated by the grandeur. Thank you, but I prefer to take care of myself. Lady Han's eyes narrowed slightly. Your Highness. If there's anything I need, I'll let you know, he added gently. But for now, I just want some space. There was a pause. Then Lady Han bowed her head, though he could see the flicker of suspicion behind her calm demeanor. As you wish. She turned and left with the maids trailing behind, the doors closing softly behind them. Ji-yeon exhaled and turned back to the room. It was beautiful, opulent even, but it felt cold. Empty. A gilded cage. He ran his fingers over the edge of a vanity table encrusted with jewels. Then he sat down on the plush bed and stared at the wall for a long time. He already missed Kyung-hoon. The absence hit harder than he expected. The room was dimly lit, a golden glow flickering from the oil lamps. Shadows danced across the silk-draped walls as the queen paced furiously, her hands clenched into trembling fists. The king sat still, eyes locked on a wine goblet in his hand, as if it held the answers to a life he could no longer control. We should have executed him the moment we found out, the queen spat, her voice sharp and full of restrained fury. He tried to kill our son. Our only child. And you're sitting there like your hands are tied. They are tied, Yanoa, the king replied quietly, voice low, heavy with shame. You think I don't want to end him? But without Jin Suk, I wouldn't be wearing this crown. She stopped pacing and turned on him, her eyes glittering. So our son's life is a fair trade for your throne, so you can give them to one of your bastard children? To Tae-jin. No, the king snapped, standing abruptly. But everything we built, everything we fought for. I did it with his backing. His gold, his network, his filth. He looked away, jaw tight. Without that alliance, I'd have been crushed before I even reached the capital gates. The queen's voice softened, but her rage burned steady beneath the surface. And now that same man controls you. Manipulates you. Threatens your son's life like it means nothing. They stood in silence for a moment, the air between them thick with regret. "We can't let him win," she whispered finally. "There's only one way," the king said grimly, eyes narrowing. "But it won't be easy." The night was quiet, but Haru woke with a start. A strange pull dragged him from sleep, the kind only an old shaman recognized. He reached for the robe at the side of his bed and stepped outside, the moon casting silver light across the earth. The wind stirred. And there, in the courtyard, stood an old woman. "Madame O. Joe Ball," he breathed. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes red and swollen. Dirt streaked her face, and her shoulders trembled. "Haru," her voice cracked as she stepped forward. "Husband, please." His heart dropped into his stomach. "What happened?" She fell to her knees. "It's our daughter, she's in danger. I have no one else to turn to. You have to save her." At the same time in the royal dungeons, the clinking of armor echoed faintly in the background, but another sound moved through the stone corridors, soft, deliberate footsteps, a stark contrast to the harshness of the place. A cloaked figure moved in silence, carrying a tray of food. The guards didn't look twice, the figure wore the official servant seal. She stopped at the cell. Inside, the assassins sat in shadows, chained but alert. They eyed her with suspicion until she placed the food down and left without a word. Moments later, the silence was shattered by violent coughing. Choking. Wheezing. Then, silence. Moments later, Jiun stormed into the prison with a small unit of soldiers behind him. "Open the cell," he ordered. "It's time to begin the interrogation. They should start talking." The guard pulled open the door. But the sight that met them froze Jiun in his tracks. The assassins lay on the cold ground, faces twisted, foaming at the mouth, lifeless. "No, no, no, no." Jiun cursed, grabbing the bars in disbelief. Who the hell let this happen? Just then, the cloaked figure entered the quiet chamber, moving with purpose. She shut the door softly, then reached up and pulled back the hood. Lady Han. Her face was calm as she set the tray aside, pulled out a small, elegant glass vial from within her robes, and placed it on the vanity. The vial glowed faintly under the moonlight. She studied herself in the mirror. Not a hair out of place. Not a wrinkle of emotion. With practiced precision, she adjusted her collar, smoothed down her robe, and pressed a hand to her chest, calming her heartbeat. Then, with the serene grace expected of her, she walked the long corridor to the queen's quarters. She knocked gently. "Your Majesty," she said with a bow as the doors opened. "I've come to bid you good night." Her tone was warm. Her smile, serene. And her hands, still carried the scent of death. Thanks for watching. Do like and subscribe to the channel for more episodes.